In my previous life, I unexpectedly saved the kidnapped socialite from the capital's elite circle, Liu Ryan. At that time, I was working for jobs a day, spending all my energy transforming her from a frightened girl into a delicate little princess. However, when she was taken back by the Liu family, they made sure everyone was forbidden from mentioning that dark, unforgettable past. The head of the Liu family, recognizing my favor to them, asked me what I wanted. At that time, I naively said, I want to marry Ryan. I want to take care of her for the rest of my life. But what I didn't know was, from the moment she returned to the Liu family, Liu Ryan had fallen in love with the wealthy heir from the capital, Liu Yunhui. After we married, she became extremely cold to me, even to the point where every time she held my hand, she would immediately wipe it clean with her handkerchief. Later on, she became pregnant, and in order to avoid the label of being an ungrateful person, while also being able to be with Liu Yunhui in a legitimate relationship, she personally pushed me off a high building. Before it happened, she carelessly told me, my first choice will always be Yunhui. Anyone else can be a backup. Sung Huai, you, a lowly person, are not worthy of being my husband. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day when the head of the Liu family had asked me what I wanted. This time, I tucked away all my delusions and booked a flight ticket to leave Jingzhou a week later. I calmly told the head of the Liu family, I want money, and then I will leave Jingzhou to pursue the life I truly wanted. What? Are you really willing to let go of Ryan? Hearing my response, the head of the Liu family frowned, his eyes filled with disbelief. Everyone knew how deeply I loved Liu Ryan. They all believed that I would surely use the fact that I saved her life as leverage and do whatever it took to make her marry me. In my past life, I did exactly that. What I got in return was indifference, disdain, and ultimately a death sentence. The pain of crashing to the ground, my body shattered upon impact, is still painfully vivid in my memory. Even the look in Liu Ryan's eyes as she pushed me off the building, the sense of relief in her gaze, is something I can never forget. Living again. I don't want to be a fool anymore. I took a deep breath, and with a calm smile, I looked at the head of the Liu family. Liu Ryan and I come from completely different worlds. She deserves better, and I want to pursue my own life. Please, Uncle Liu, let me go. The head of the Liu family sat in silence for a while, then sighed deeply and nodded. You're right. The difference in your statuses is too great. You're not meant to be happy together. The Liu family appreciates that you saved her life and have cared for her so well. We'll give you whatever money you need. With that, he lifted his eyes to look at me. Ah, Huai, you don't actually have to leave Jingzhou. I'll make sure to pave the way for your future. Hearing this, I smiled and shook my head. With lowered eyes, I muttered to myself, the sky is high and the birds are free to fly. I too want to live a life that doesn't revolve around Liu Ryan anymore. Uncle Liu, I'd appreciate it if you don't tell her that I'm leaving just yet. She's just taken over the company and is really busy. I don't want her distracted by these things. After leaving the old Liu family residence, the sky was already darkening. As I opened the car door, my phone in my bag rang. I pulled it out to see that it was a call from Liu Ryan. In the last life, by this time, she and Liu Yunhui had already exchanged heartfelt words, but I had forced her to marry me owing to a life-saving debt, after old Liu had pressured her into it. In the days that followed, I was so immersed in the happiness of marriage that I never noticed. It wasn't until I caught Liu Ryan and Liu Yunhui kissing that I finally realized her heart had long been occupied by someone else. My thoughts flickered back. I pressed the answer button, but before I could say anything, Liu Ryan's furious voice blared from the other end of the line. Song Huai, I asked you to deliver a file. Is it S7? Look at how much time has passed. You can't even get something so small right. What use are you to me? Her harsh words snapped me back to reality. I had indeed been supposed to deliver the file. I took a deep breath. Forget it. If this were the old me, I would have groveled, apologizing for ages, and then rushed to deliver it to her. But now, suddenly, I didn't want to do that anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It seemed like she hadn't quite processed what had just happened. After a while, she finally spoke. How could you forget something like this? Truly, you have the brain of a pig. Forget it. I've made dinner. I'll be back soon. With that, Liu Ryan didn't give me a chance to say anything more. She hung up the phone. I stared at the disconnected screen and couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow deep inside. Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. In the next moment, I quickly opened the flight booking app and booked a one-way ticket to leave the country in a week. 5 years ago, living in a small town, I had unexpectedly saved Liu Ryan, who had been kidnapped and thrown off a cliff. At the time, she was severely injured and had lost all memories of people and events. I spent all the money I had to save her life. The police had later told me they couldn't find any information about Liu Ryan's identity. They told me to just take care of her for now, and so I did for 5 years. After Liu Ryan had fully recovered, she showed a completely different side of herself. Not only did she become incredibly capable, but her beauty was enough to leave anyone breathless. The villagers would tease me, saying, "Hawaii, did you pick up a wife?" I never knew how to respond to their teasing, but deep down, I felt a quiet joy. As an orphan who had grown up without parents, living off the kindness of others. I didn't realize when it happened, but Liu Ryan's presence had slowly begun to change my life. I gradually grew accustomed to having her by my side, so I dropped out of school and started working for jobs every day. Just to support Liu Ryan's education, I made sure she always had the best of everything, spending 5 years turning her into the delicate little princess everyone adored. Liu Ryan was also incredibly naive. She was diligent in her studies and always kind to me. She would secretly take up part-time jobs, simply because she felt bad about how hard I was working. And she'd use the money she earned to buy me new clothes I could never afford. She would even come to the place where I worked every day during the cold winters, just to pick me up after my shift. After 5 years of these tender, mutual sacrifices, Liu Ryan's family finally found her. That was when I understood why, all those years, the authorities couldn't find any information about her identity. It turned out she was from an incredibly powerful family in the capital, a circle of high society that had kept her hidden and protected. They had made sure no one ever knew who she really was. The day we left the small town, Liu Ryan gently took my hand, her eyes shining with warmth as she looked up at me and said, "Hawaii, come with me. From now on, it will be my turn to take care of you." When I opened the door, the dim light of the living room flickered softly. Liu Ryan was sitting on the sofa, wearing a custom-made little black dress that was clearly expensive. Her face was dark and clouded, and only when she heard me open the door did she slowly turn her head and glance at me. Her voice was cold, as though coated in ice, as she asked, "Where have you been? Aren't you supposed to stay home quietly?" I stood there, staring at her for a long time, without saying a word, and slowly turned on the light. Nonchalantly, I answered her question. Uncle Liu had something to ask me. I went back to the old house. With that, I walked into the kitchen, expertly tying on my apron and beginning to cook. Seeing my cold attitude, Liu Ryan instantly exploded, storming into the kitchen. "Song Huai, are you trying to turn this upside down? What kind of attitude do you think you have when you speak to me?" I didn't know exactly when it started, but her words were always sharp, full of thorns. In my past life, I thought she was just overwhelmed with the responsibilities of running the company. But now I understand. It was because she didn't love me anymore. Naturally, there was no need to be polite. A bitter ache spread through my chest, and I took a deep breath, placing the knife down. I turned to face Liu Ryan. So what kind of attitude do you expect me to use when speaking to you? Liu Ryan, I don't owe you anything. At my words, her hand, which had been hanging at her side, clenched so tightly it made a sharp cracking sound. Her eyes, red with rage, locked onto me. She let out a cold laugh. Don't owe me anything? Song Huai. If it weren't for me, would you be living in such a nice house and driving such a great car? Don't forget, you were just an orphan from a small county town. The closer we were, the more she knew exactly where to twist the knife to make it hurt the most. And in that moment, my heart shattered into pieces. But I had to hold back my tears, forcing myself not to let them fall. After a long silence, it seemed like Liu Ryan finally realized what she had said. She softened her tone and was about to speak when her phone rang. As she pulled the phone from her pocket, I saw the name Yunhui flashing on the screen. Compared to the fury she had directed at me, her voice when speaking to him was almost serene, gentle as flowing water. Huai, don't worry. I'll be there to pick you up soon. Stay in the car and don't move. With that, Liu Ryan hurriedly left the kitchen, not sparing me even a glance. Not until the door closed behind her did I collapse onto the cold floor, and my tears spilled uncontrollably. I sobbed, clutching the fabric of my chest, whispering in agony, Liu Ryan, every time you call those two words, are you thinking of me, your Ahuai, or is it him, your Yunhui? That night, Liu Ryan didn't come home. The next day, I saw the trending news showing a picture of her being carried into a villa by Liu Yunhui. Everyone was talking about it. The wealthy heiress Liu Ryan and the rich young heir Liu Yunhui. The perfect match nearing the altar. They were the epitome of a destined couple. And yes, they belonged to the same world. As for Liu Ryan, to her I was nothing more than an outsider who had happened to save her life once. It only took me 3 days, and I was ready with the preparations to leave for abroad. I even spent a large sum to contact a language school, planning to study there for a few years. Liu Ryan was right. Without her, I would never have the life I have now. So we truly didn't owe each other anything. Since coming to Jingzhou, Uncle Liu had been relatively kind to me, and when I was about to leave, he even gave me a large sum of money. I thought to myself that we would probably never meet again, so I decided to buy a small gift for him. I walked into a store that sold ties, and as soon as I pushed the door open, I saw Liu Ryan smiling brightly, carefully helping Liu Yunhui try on a tie. Her face was full of smiles, and she gently adjusted the tie around his neck. Their gazes met, lingering on each other, with an unspoken, almost tangible sense of intimacy. At that moment, Liu Ryan noticed me. The smile on her face vanished instantly, and her expression darkened as she furrowed her brow, walking toward me in displeasure. Are you following me? A sharp pang struck my heart, and I was about to explain. But to my surprise, Liu Yunhui spoke first. He affectionately took Liu Ryan's hand. This must be Mr. Song, the one who saved Ryan's life. Seeing them like this, I couldn't stay calm, so my response came out a little more forcefully than I intended. And what if I am? Song Huai, watch your tone. As soon as I said that, Liu Ryan suddenly shouted at the top of her lungs. I turned to her, giving her a cold, indifferent smile. Did I say something wrong? Seeing this, Liu Yunhui quickly stepped in to smooth things over. He gave a gentle smile and tugged at the corner of Liu Ryan's sleeve. Alright, Ryan, why are you getting so upset over someone so beneath you? With a look of disdain, he turned his gaze toward me. Mr. Song, looks like a few days living in the Liu household has made you forget your place. Don't forget, if it weren't for you saving Ryan, you wouldn't even have the right to stand here talking to me. Everyone seemed to think that saving Liu Ryan was some kind of honor for me. Even Liu Ryan herself believed that. At that thought, I lowered my gaze, snorting coldly. With a neutral tone, I spoke. If I could do it all over again, I'd rather never have saved you. Song Huai! Liu Ryan roared, her eyes burning with a murderous fury. Through gritted teeth, she spat. Say that again if you dare. I raised my eyes to look at her, tears blurring my vision. With a hoarse voice, I answered, Liu Ryan, if I could, I'd rather have never saved you. This time, she fell silent, only staring at me with a complex expression for a long while. Finally, she stormed out in a huff. Lu Yunhui, seeing this, immediately made to follow her. But as he passed by me, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look at me. He smiled smugly. By the way, there's some good news I think Mr. Song should hear. Ryan's pregnant. Those 5 short words caused my blood to freeze, as if my entire body had turned to ice. I hadn't expected this to happen so soon. It was a few years down the line in my previous life. Seeing the dazed expression on my face, Lu Yunhui smirked, clearly pleased, and left. The night before he left, Liu Ryan, for the first time, took the initiative to call me. She said she wanted to talk to me about something important. I figured she was going to tell me about her pregnancy, or maybe their plans to get married. But honestly, none of that mattered anymore. When she arrived at my place, her eyes immediately landed on the suitcase I had packed by the entrance. Liu Ryan froze for a moment, looking at it with confusion. Where are you going? I glanced at the suitcases with an indifferent look, and for the first time, I lied to her. You remember Aunt Zhang, who lived next door to us, right? She's sick. Said she misses me and wants me to come visit. When are you leaving? Liu Ryan quickly asked. I hesitated for a brief moment, then instinctively lied again. Tomorrow evening. At that, Liu Ryan nodded, murmuring to herself. And Zhang used to take such good care of me too. Tomorrow evening, I'll go with you to visit. I didn't answer. Neither of us spoke. The silence hung thick between us, and the atmosphere became strangely eerie. Eventually, it was Liu Ryan who broke the awkward silence. She looked at me several times, wanting to say something but stopping herself. Finally, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a velvet box. When she opened it, a dazzling diamond ring, as large as a pigeon's egg, caught my eye. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. Was she really going to marry Liu Yunhui? Do you think it's beautiful? Liu Ryan asked, bringing me back to my senses. I lifted my gaze to her. It's fine. She fell silent, pressing her lips together. She looked somewhat disappointed. Why? I've been too irritable these past few days. I've said a lot of hurtful things to you, but I didn't mean to. Liu Ryan suddenly began to apologize. I smiled faintly, thinking to myself that she at least had some dignity. At least she knew how to apologize before we parted ways. I'm sorry for everything I did. It's fine. It's all in the past. I answered indifferently. At my words, Liu Ryan's eyes brightened. Without warning, she grabbed my hand. Really? You're not angry? I didn't understand why she suddenly acted this way. Just as I was about to speak, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I gently pushed Liu Ryan's hand away, took out my phone, and saw that it was a message from the real estate agent I had contacted earlier. Mr. Song, the rental arrangement you requested has been confirmed. The landlord will contact you as soon as you land. I pressed the screen off and looked back at Liu Ryan. This time, it was really time to say goodbye. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled at her. Yeah, I'm not angry. At these words, Liu Ryan seemed to exhale in relief and reached for my hand again. But this time, I instinctively took a step back. The subtle movement didn't escape her notice. Liu Ryan's smile froze, visibly stiffening. Why? You really aren't mad at me? Actually, there's so much I've wanted to say to you. Liu Ryan, let's talk when I get back. I interrupted her, feeling an inexplicable fatigue wash over me. She opened her mouth to speak, but in the end, said nothing and simply nodded. We've got time. We'll talk after we visit Jingzhou. It can wait. I gave her the excuse that I was tired and needed sleep, signaling it was time for her to leave. As she was about to go, Liu Ryan turned back to look at me several times. When she reached the door, she shoved the ring into my hand. Please hold on to this for me. I'll pick you up after work tomorrow. We can go visit Jingzhou together. I smiled but said nothing, watching her until the door clicked shut behind her. The second it closed, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I tossed the ring straight into the trash can, dragging my suitcase and holding the car keys. I headed toward the airport. This time, it was truly over. 5 years later, the plane touched down in Jingzhou. As soon as I stepped out of the terminal, I spotted her from a distance. She was standing by the roadside, leaning against a black Bentley. Her delicate features framed by a gentle, warm smile. It was clear that Ji Tangbai had spotted me too. She waved at me, then strode confidently over to where I stood. Long time no see. Ah, Hawaii. I couldn't help but smile in return. It's rare for Director Ji to personally come pick me up. Ji Tangbai didn't rush to respond. Instead, she took the suitcase from my hand, gesturing for me to get into the car as she said, "Everyone's waiting for you." They're all looking forward to meeting the late blooming great screenwriter. 5 years ago, after leaving Jingzhou, I flew to the United States to study. By chance, I got involved in the world of screenwriting and fell passionately in love with it. From not knowing anything at the start, to now being able to independently write a solid script, and even pursue a career as a screenwriter. It only took me 5 years to carve out my own path. Many people are curious what kind of skills I, a latecomer to the profession, possess. Coincidentally, Ji Tangbai had a pretty solid IP in hand, and she suggested we collaborate on something. Remembering the help she had given me when I was abroad, I didn't think twice before returning to Jingzhou. On the way to the welcoming banquet, I looked out the window, watching the streets slip by, and couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia. I thought I'd never return to this place again, but unexpectedly, here I was, stepping back into it. How long are you planning to stay this time? Ji Tangbai asked. I didn't think too much about it. I answered truthfully, I'll leave once your movie is finished. By then, the weather in Yun City should be nice. I'll just go out and get some inspiration or something. Upon hearing this, Ji Tangbai nodded in understanding. Neither of us spoke again. Before long, we arrived at the venue for her welcome banquet. We ascended the stairs side by side. As soon as the door to the private room was opened, I saw the colleagues who had been waiting for quite a while. What struck me as most unusual was that I was actually going to see someone I thought I'd never encounter again in my life. Liu Yan. Let me introduce you all. This is the famous screenwriter joke. Her Chinese name is Song Huai. As Ji Tangbai finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Several people began whispering among themselves, unable to hold back their curiosity. I can't believe such a well-known screenwriter is still so young. People who don't know might think she's just some inexperienced kid, fresh out of school. Don't say that. Her skills are widely recognized in the industry. I heard Director Ji worked really hard to bring her back this time. I think their relationship is more than just professional. These discussions didn't affect me at all. I shifted my gaze away from Liu Yan and offered them a calm smile. Just call me Zi Huai. I look forward to working with you all in the future. After saying this, Ji Tangbai gestured for me to take a seat. But from the moment I entered the room, I couldn't help but feel a burning gaze. It was obvious who it came from. As soon as I sat down, Ji Tangbai began to introduce Liu Yan. This is Liu Yan, the co-investor of the film. She glanced at Liu Yan as she spoke. Liu Yan. This is my good friend, Song Huai. I don't recall you ever mentioning this friend of yours before. Liu Yan's voice was low and hoarse, her tone carrying a hint of displeasure. At this, Ji Tangbai raised an eyebrow. After all, she's not just any friend. Plus, Ah Huai hasn't lived in Jingzhou for a while, so it's normal that Liu R. Yuyan hasn't met her. Not just any friend? Liu R. Yuyan slowly enunciated the words, her lips curling into a cold smile. Seeing the atmosphere grow tense, everyone instinctively fell silent. I poured myself a full glass of liquor, then suddenly stood up, staring at Liu R. Yuyan. Liu R. Yuyan, thank you for your investment in seeing the Green Mountains. My relationship with Tangbai is indeed quite close. So this drink is my way of wishing the film great success in advance. With that, I lifted the glass and downed the strong liquor in one go. But as soon as I did, both Ji Tangbai and Liu R. Yuyan stood up, their brows furrowed as they stared at me. The glass in my hand wasn't even empty yet, when Ji Tangbai swiftly snatched it from me. With everyone's astonished gaze on me, I downed the drink in one go. Then I turned and smiled at Ji Tangbai. Your stomach can't handle that much. Don't try to be brave. Familiar scenes flashed through my mind. The first time Ji Tangbai and I met was 3 years ago when I was just starting out. It was another social gathering. And back then, the director insisted I finish an entire glass of hard liquor. I hesitated, unable to find a good reason to refuse. And after some hesitation, I steeled myself and picked up the glass, preparing to down it. But before I could do so, a slender, delicate hand swiftly snatched the glass from my hand. Before I could even react, Ji Tangbai had already finished the drink. Then she smiled and said to the director, "Don't make things difficult for a newcomer." Ji Tangbai and I locked eyes in the air for a long moment, before I was the first to snap back to reality. Just as I did, I happened to meet Liu R. Yuyan's eyes, and the expression on her face was one that words couldn't even describe. She snorted coldly, then raised her hand and began to clap. When she spoke again, her tone was sarcastic. Director Ji and Mr. Sung really seemed to have quite the bond. They can even share the same drink. At her words, Ji Tangbai was about to speak, but I cut her off before she could. I've just gotten off a long flight. I'm pretty tired. I'm afraid I won't be able to stay long today. Anyway, we'll have plenty more opportunities to meet. Have fun tonight, everyone. I'll cover the bill. After saying that, I stood up, ready to leave. I didn't spare a single glance at Liu R. Yuyan. Seeing this, Ji Tangbai looked at me with concern. She approached and asked, "Are you okay? Let me take you back." I shook my head. "No need. I'll be fine on my own." "Are you sure you can find your way back?" Ji Tangbai smiled faintly. "Let's go." Coincidentally, I need to go back to handle some matters too. I wasn't planning to stay long in Jingzhou this time. I had originally planned to stay in a hotel, but Ji Tangbai insisted, saying she had several apartments in her neighborhood. Since they're just sitting empty, you might as well stay in one of my places. I turned her down several times, but she was very persistent. So I stopped hesitating and agreed. Ji Tangbai said her goodbyes to the people in the room, and then led me out. Just as we reached the underground parking lot, Liu R. Yuyan suddenly called out to me from behind. "Song Huai, wait a second." Both Ji Tangbai and I stopped in our tracks. She instinctively moved to shield me, smiling at Liu R. Yuyan. "If you need something from Ah Huai, it's a bit late today. If you have business, you can always talk to the crew next time." But Liu R. Yuyan didn't seem to hear anything she said. Ignoring Ji Tangbai completely, she strode past her and grabbed my arm. With a flush in her eyes, she asked, "Where have you been these 5 years? Do you know what happened back then?" "Please control yourself." I interrupted Liu R. Yuyan's words, jerked my arm away, and took a step back. In Liu R. Yuyan's eyes, there was a brief flash of surprise and sadness. She repeated my words in a low, almost questioning tone. "Please control yourself." "Song Huai, you never used to call me that." I looked at her with no expression, coldly replying, You just said used to. Of course, things are different now. Now, if there's nothing else, please move out of the way. I'm going back to rest. When she saw that I was about to leave, she quickly grabbed my arm. Her tone suddenly shifted to a pitiful one. I don't want you to leave. Why? I have so many things I want to ask you, so many things I want to say. Before I could respond, Ji Tangbai strode over. She pulled Liu Yuyan's hand off mine. Huai's tired. Please don't disturb her. If you need something, talk next time. We're going home. After saying that, Ji Tangbai started to lead me away. But Liu Yuyan snorted coldly, casting a dark look at us. Going home? So you're living together now? Upon hearing this, Ji Tangbai nodded. Yes, we do live together. I don't care what history you and Jun have. But right now, she's very tired and needs rest. So please, stop bothering her. With that, Ji Tangbai didn't give Liu Yuyan a chance to reply, and swiftly led me away from the scene. On the way back, Ji Tangbai and I sat in the back seat, neither of us speaking first, but I could feel that she had a lot of questions on her mind. She then proceeded to tell me the entire story between Liu Yuyan and me. The more she listened, the deeper her brows furrowed. We're not exactly a couple. It's just that we've helped each other through some difficult times. After saying this, I turned to Ji Tangbai, jokingly asking, but with the way you just spoke to Liu Yuyan, aren't you worried she pull out the investment? Ji Tangbai snapped out of her thoughts, smiling nonchalantly. Why? Right now, I'm the one who doesn't want to continue the collaboration. She can pull out if she wants. I can cover the costs myself. Hearing this, I couldn't help but chuckle. Pretty cool, Director G. But if she really pulls out the funding, don't blame me, okay? Ji Tangbai laughed helplessly, reaching over to mess up my hair. That's not going to happen. If I'm going to blame anyone, it's not going to be you. The atmosphere was even more lighthearted than I had expected. This was the way I'd been interacting with Ji Tangbai for the past 3 years. Easygoing and relaxed. It made me feel no burden at all. Ji Tangbai had already arranged my accommodations, even thoughtfully setting up the bed for me. I'll be staying upstairs. If you need anything, just call me. The cleaning lady just finished tidying up the place. The only thing missing was the bed setup, but I've taken care of that. I'll have someone come by to tidy up the rest tomorrow. Just as she finished speaking, the bed was perfectly made. Ji Tangbai turned to me, smiling. You'll have to make do with it tonight. Looking at the room that had been neatly arranged, I smiled and nodded. Okay. Thank you, Director G, for personally making my bed. I really appreciate it. You're just full of sarcasm. After tidying up everything, Ji Tangbai was about to go back and rest. She gave me some more instructions, but then suddenly flung herself into my arms. I stiffened, my hands hovering in the air, unsure whether to embrace her. But she held me even tighter. Lying against my chest, she whispered, Why? It's been a long time. Soon, I threw myself into the filming of the movie. I spent my days at the set analyzing the script. And after work, I would go home with Ji Tangbai. Her cooking skills were amazing. And within just a few days, I'd gained a couple of pounds. One evening after work, we were walking side by side, when Ji Tangbai turned to me with a smile and asked, What should we have for dinner? Weren't you craving sweet and sour ribs last time? Enough, Ji Tangbai. Can't you see how much weight I've gained? Just as we were joking around, Liu Yuyan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, blocking our path. She had been coming around the set frequently these past few days, always looking like she had something she wanted to say, but kept holding back. But I deliberately avoided her, so there wasn't much she could do. Liu Yuyan, if you're worried about the movie's progress or quality, you can still pull out your investment now. I won't charge you any penalty fees. Ji Tangbai said this, her voice tinged with annoyance, But Liu Ruyan continued to ignore her completely. Liu Ruyan walked directly in front of me, her voice somewhat humble as she asked, "Why? I'd like to invite you to dinner. There's a lot I need to talk to you about." I knew that if I didn't agree, she would just continue to pester me. With a helpless sigh, I nodded. Turning to Ji Tangbai, "I'll talk to her. You go ahead and head back. I'll be fine." "Why?" Ji Tangbai opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she stayed silent. With a cold expression, she said, "I'll wait for you to come back for dinner." With that, she shot a glare at Liu Ruyan and walked away with quick strides. It wasn't until Ji Tangbai's figure had completely disappeared from view that I finally turned my attention back to Liu Ruyan. "If you have something to say, Liu Ruyan, just say it here." But honestly, I didn't feel there was anything left to talk about between us. Faced with my resolute attitude, Liu Ruyan bitterly curled her lips. "You lied to me. You promised you'd wait for me to come back, and we'd sit down and talk properly. But when I came to find you that day, you were already gone. I thought you went back to see Zhang, but you didn't say anything to me. I drove for an entire day and night back to the county town to find you, and Zhang told me you never even came back. Why? Do you know how desperate I felt at that moment?" I looked at her, seeing the painful expression on her face. But inside, I felt nothing at all. If anything, I was a little more curious about whether Ji Tangbai would actually make me sweet and sour ribs later. I didn't know, and frankly, I didn't care to know. "Liu Ruyan, since you've chosen Lu Yunhui, I wish you both happiness, which is why I chose to leave." I paused for a moment, shrugging my shoulders. Besides, we never really had anything between us to begin with. "Song Huai!" At this, she screamed loudly, her eyes redder than I had ever seen them. "You actually say we had nothing between us? It was you who saved me. It was you who worked for jobs a day to support me. You made me so deeply attached to you. Now you're telling me that all of this has nothing to do with you? Do you even have a conscience?" Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh, frowning in confusion as I looked at Liu Ruyan. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? Liu Ruyan, do you even have a conscience? Have you really forgotten all the things you once told me?" She was left speechless by my rebuttal, her mouth opening and closing several times in a flurry before she managed to speak. "Why? Whether you believe it or not, I really do know that I was wrong. I had a dream. In the dream, you used the life-saving favor to force my father into making me marry you. At first, I was happy about it. But then, when we started working together and I met Lu Yunhui, our relationship became really complicated. At that point, you misunderstood our connection, and somewhere along the way, we drifted apart. I started to treat you terribly. I even hurt you. After that, I regretted it deeply and fell into a serious mental breakdown. Eventually, I ended up trying to end it all. But in an instant, I woke up to days before you left, so I desperately tried to keep you," she said, hastily pulling out a velvet box from her pocket, and inside was the very diamond ring I had once discarded. Liu Ruyan anxiously spoke. "I was going to propose to you. I wanted to make up for the hurt I caused you in the past, but you left without a word. I searched for you for 5 whole years." Listening to her words, my first reaction was that Liu Ruyan had also somehow been reborn. With this thought, I suddenly understood why, the night before I left, she had acted so differently. And I understood why she seemed like a completely different person now. I took a deep breath. "But you were pregnant. Could it be that, as the mother of the child, you really thought it was so easy to just change the father?" "Huai, you're wrong." Liu Ruyan quickly interrupted my words, hastily explaining, "I'm not pregnant. I swear on my life. It was just a lie that Lu Yunhui made up, trying to make you give up. Believe me." From the expression on Liu Ruyan's face, it was clear she wasn't lying. But in the past life, She truly did develop feelings for Liu Yunhui. This time, though, she hadn't even had the chance to get involved with him before she was reborn. Suddenly, I felt a strange sense of guilt, as if fate itself was playing tricks on us. But things have already happened. From the moment I decided to leave, I never thought about turning back. Now, I don't intend to tell Liu Yan that I've been reborn either. Instead, I coldly smiled. Nice story, but even with all that, we can't go back. Liu Yan, don't come disturb the peaceful life I have now. After saying that, I turned to leave, but then she suddenly chuckled softly before asking in a disappointed tone, "Is your coldness towards me because of Ji Tangbai?" I paused, but I didn't turn around. Even if it's not because of her, I'll still be this way because of what others did to you. And that enthusiastic Song Jun you used to have? He's long gone. Just as I pushed the door open and stepped inside, I saw Ji Tangbai in the kitchen, busy with an apron on. She had already set the table with the dinner she prepared. When she heard me, she turned and gave me a faint smile. "Wash your hands, dinner's ready." I knew Ji Tangbai was upset about what happened earlier, but I walked into the kitchen, first washing my hands by her side, letting the silence stretch on for a while. She didn't look at me the entire time, still focused on what she was doing. After I finished washing my hands, I stood there watching her. She finally snapped out of it, turning to me and saying, "Go outside. There's all smoke." Ji Tangbai, are you angry? Without any warning, the question left her frozen all over. Even the motion of stir-frying came to a halt. For a long while. Why? Do I now have the right and identity to be angry? When she asked this, there was an inexplicable sadness in her voice. In the 3 years we've known each other, Ji Tangbai has always been the image of sunshine and optimism. In these 3 years of being together, I've also gained many unexpected joys. In the very beginning, our relationship was already quite ambiguous. But at that time, I was focused on studying, on living my own life. She was just as busy, chasing after her own path. So silently, we both agreed not to mention it. Until now. This time, Ji Tangbai took the initiative to invite me back to Beijing for the recording of Sing the Spring. To be honest, when I first heard her invitation, I was timid, because I feared that, from here on, we would truly become nothing more than ordinary friends. But in the end, courage triumphed over fear. I thought I should be by her side. It was when Ji Tangbai hadn't fully realized what was happening yet that I stepped forward, cupped her face in my hands, and leaned down to kiss her. "Ji Tangbai, of course you have that right." I could feel her body trembling slightly, then going rigid. After a long while, she finally dropped the spatula from her hand, turned off the stove, and pulled me close, standing on tiptoe to embrace me. The kiss deepened gradually, becoming more intense. Ji Tangbai was much shorter than me. With a quick turn, I easily lifted her up and sat her on the island counter. One of her hands rested on my chest, while the other hooked around my neck. The charged atmosphere, full of intoxicating hormones, exploded between us. We were both like fish stranded on the shore, gasping for air, mouths open wide, until I gently placed her on the soft C-shaped cushion. Under the dim light, I could still clearly see the undeniable desire in Ji Tangbai's eyes. I traced her face as if I were admiring a precious treasure, before finally lowering my head to kiss the corner of her lips softly. She didn't respond immediately, but as she tilted her neck and kissed me again, that was the best answer. As soon as I realized I had woken up, Ji Tangbai, dressed in her pajamas, walked in. From the moment she saw me, her smile never left the corners of her mouth. She sat by the seaside, leaning over to plant a kiss on me. "Are you going back to sleep, or do you want something to eat?" I replied, "Let's eat something." She kissed me back. Then, after dressing, I took her hand and led her out of the dressing room. On the table, there was the meal she had reheated. It contained my long-craved sweet and sour ribs. The happiness I felt in this moment was beyond words. Since we confirmed our relationship, Ji Tongbai and I were no longer hiding anything, even when we were on set. Soon, everyone found out about our relationship, including Liu Ryan. Hawaii, tell me they're all lying. She hurriedly pushed open the door to the dressing room. I was in the middle of revising the script. Her sudden entrance broke my train of thought, and I felt an unexplained surge of anger rise within me. I set the script down, furrowed my brows, and looked at Liu Ryan. Hasn't anyone taught you that you should knock before entering? Liu Ryan remained silent, staring at me in silence, her eyes expectant, waiting for me to clarify things with Ji Tongbai. But she was disappointed. I raised my gaze to meet hers and said calmly, "They weren't lying. Ji Tongbai and I are indeed together. When we get married, we'll let you know. You can come and give us a gift then." My indifferent attitude only infuriated Liu Ryan further. She stormed up to me, grabbing my shoulders, panicking and angry as she demanded, "Are you still blaming me for what happened before? Are you still holding a grudge over those things?" But I really had nothing to do with Lu Yunhua. Hawaii. From beginning to end, the only person I've ever loved is you. I'll never forget that it was your life that saved mine. And I'll never forget the 5 years we spent together in that small town. We were the only ones in each other's lives. After all, how could we have become like strangers? By the time she finished speaking, a hot tear fell, landing on my face. Liu Ryan's hollow, despairing eyes locked onto my neck. There, a faint red mark stood out. Her pupils widened, suddenly tightening with realization. She lifted her hand and rubbed furiously at the spot. But no matter how much she rubbed, the redness only grew, never fading. When Liu Ryan finally understood what it was, her hand fell limply to her side. I couldn't take it any longer. I pushed her away with force, leaping to my feet. "Liu Ryan, since we returned to Jingzhou, you've made it clear to everyone that no one should ever mention our past. I've heard you tell those friends of yours that those 5 years were the most shameful days of your life. Then later, you and your people kept reminding me that the only reason I'm living this good life today is because I saved you. Don't forget, you once said, 'I'm just an orphan from a small town, and without you, I could never have become who I am now.' That's not true." She tried to retort, but she couldn't find the words. I took a deep breath and said with a weary tone, "Yes, if it weren't for the Liu family's generosity, I wouldn't have this life today. But I saved your life, so we're even now. I don't want to be even with you." Liu Ryan screamed, tears falling uncontrollably. She stepped forward, reaching for my hand. Seeing that, I quickly took a step back. "Don't come any closer, Liu Ryan. I know the dreams you speak of are because you've been reborn. Because I've experienced the same." Hearing this, she froze in her tracks. She looked at me in disbelief. "It's because of everything I went through in my past life. The horrific, tragic scenes that still haunt my dreams. I can never forget everything I truly experienced. Heaven gave me the chance to be reborn. And I don't want to stay tangled in meaningless, broken relationships. I'm living well now, I'm happy. I want to hold on to this happiness, not let anyone disturb it. That's why I never told you about my rebirth. Now you understand why I left you. I hope you can respect my decision." I took a deep breath as I said this, lifting my gaze to meet hers. "So, don't come and disturb me anymore." In the end, Liu Ryan didn't say a word. She left. I thought we would never see each other again. But I never imagined that evening I would hear the news of her attempt to take her own life. I heard that when the doctor arrived at the scene. Her body had already begun to cool. Liu Ryan had submerged herself in the bathtub. Both of her wrists were cut so deep the bones were visible. It was clear she had made up her mind to end it all. Luckily, the maid at her house found her in time and saved her life. Ji Tongbai asked if I wanted to go see her. I paused for a moment, then smiled and asked him, "Director Ji, you're so generous. Then I might as well make up with Liu Ryan and have two girlfriends." Hearing this, Ji Tongbai chuckled. She moved closer to me. Me, generous? I'm not generous at all. The following summer, Ji Tongbai and I held our wedding. She even thoughtfully invited our past acquaintances and the people from my hometown who had cared for me, because she said she wanted everyone who knew us to witness our happiness. Some would dig deep into my most sensitive past, hurting me with it, but others cherished and valued my past, swearing to love me for the rest of my life. I'm not sure what kind of ending would truly be considered beautiful, but right now, this moment feels like the best. The ceremony was about to begin. I was sitting in the dressing room, occasionally adjusting my suit or my hair. Just then, my phone, which was on the table, rang. I picked it up and saw an unfamiliar number. Without thinking too much, I pressed answer. But on the other end, there was a long silence. Just as I was about to hang up, thinking it was some sort of spam call, a familiar, hoarse voice finally spoke. It was Liu Ryan. "I heard you're getting married today." After hearing my response, Liu Ryan was silent for a moment before letting out a soft laugh. "I used to think that I would be the one to marry you. Then I did end up marrying you. But I never learned how to truly cherish you. I deserve to lose you. Ah, why? You said you didn't want to see me again. So even when I wanted to keep you by ending it all, it was useless. You ... For the first time, you were so cruel to me." Upon hearing this, I sighed deeply. Liu Ryan, when I treated you well, I almost risked my life for you. So even if you hate me now, I have no regrets. I know. So even though I'm unwilling, I choose to let go. She said this with a restrained smile, her voice lowering. At least Ji Tongbai is the one who can make you happy. But it's such a pity that I won't be able to see you walk towards happiness. From now on, I'll travel the world. Everywhere I go, I'll pray for you sincerely. Wish you peace and joy. If one day you can no longer receive my blessings, perhaps that's when I'll truly have gone to a faraway place. As she said this, Liu Ryan's tone became unusually calm. But being away from you, maybe wandering in a foreign land will be the best place for me. Finally, she said, "Why? I'm sorry. And I love you." Suddenly, memories were pulled back to 10 years ago. The summer when I saved Liu Ryan, the young girl in a pure white dress sitting beside me. We watched the orange-yellow sunset sink beyond the horizon. Liu Ryan suddenly turned to look at me. She said to me, "Hawaii, I want to watch the sunset with you for the rest of my life." At the same time, the wedding march began to play. I hung up the phone and placed it on the table, moving towards a new life.